Get ready for this one. Grant McAuley
Ooh.
joining us, super dialed in on the Atlanta Braves reporter for 92.9 The Game, host of his show From the Diamond, among other gigs as well. You can catch him all over the Atlanta scene. Grant, we spoke about a week ago. I was on your show, but since then, the Braves have lost 7 games on the West Coast to start their season. Where do we begin?
That's a great question. And I don't know that there's one correct answer for it either, because it seems like if it could go wrong, it has gone wrong and then some for this Braves club. But they're not hitting. Obviously, that's a huge problem. It's hard to win games when you don't score runs. I think the pitching has some definite holes in it. The Reynaldo Lopez injury only makes that worse. And then you have the Jerickson Profar of it all. So as far as scripting or conjuring up the worst possible start for a club, oh, and by the way, you played 2 of the best teams in baseball as well out west, and you haven't been home in what feels like about 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is. Yeah, you could pretty much look at all these points and say it doesn't add up to anything good for the Braves.
You know what the good news is, though? Who do they play today? Or tomorrow, excuse me.
Nobody today, so they can't lose today.
Tomorrow.
So that's
well, also good news. But I'm talking about who do they play tomorrow?
Yeah, no, I know. The Marlins are coming into town. They'll have their home opener. Maybe that'll give them some extra juice. On the backside of that, though, you got the Phillies.
No, but listen, in 2016, we started 0-9. Guess who we beat to end the streak and not tie history? The Miami Marlins. So here we go. Here we go. Now they could lose 3 and get to 10. That'll be really bad. But no team has ever made the playoffs after starting 0-7. Certain people named Ken Rosenthal picked the Braves to win the World Series. I would never do that because that seems crazy now. But can they rebound enough to make a run at the playoffs? Because 0-7 is a large hole to dig out of.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think everybody's seen the stat now that no team has started 0-7 and then gone on to go to the playoffs. In fact, I've seen even more stats that only a handful of them, of the 28 teams that have ever started out 0-7 for a season, have even gotten over 500. So there's a steep hill to climb. There's no two ways about it. And I don't know how it slipped my mind. You were around for 2016. That was a club that was in the midst of trying to rebuild itself. Meanwhile, this is a club that, as you just pointed out, has World Series expectations, aspirations, and all of that is a very different scene for them. So can they rebound? Yes, because I think they're a more talented team than they're playing like. That's a pretty obvious statement. They're going to get Ronald Acuna Jr. back. They're going to get Spencer Strider back. They may have Sean Murphy back by next week. That could help as well. But they've got to start hitting. And I think that's been the real question year over year for this club. They pitched lights out a year ago. I think the pitching can be good this year, expecting it to be what it was last year, maybe a bit much. But you got Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, Michael Harris, Ozzy Albies. You add Acuna back in there. Even without Profar, this lineup has serious teeth, but it has been, if you'll pardon the pun, pretty much toothless for much of this year, and that's just not going to play. Even getting up on the Dodgers in that finale, trying to avoid the 0-7, they still weren't really able to take advantage of all the opportunities that they had, and it ended up being pretty costly.
I know it's the lineup right now, not scoring runs, all that stuff. Maybe we'll get to the lineup. But do you feel like this pitching staff, when they built this team, whether it was ownership, denying them money to be able to build this pitching staff, do you feel like they kind of hoped they would do good? Or is this just another, the Braves always churn out, because this is what I said before, Braves always churn out pitching, no matter who it is. You can look in recent history, Schwellenbach, Smith Shawver, you have Bryce Elder was an all-star. I know he fell off some. Ian Anderson was the hero for the World Series. Were they just hoping, or do they really have a plan with what this pitching staff's going to be until Strider comes back?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously up for debate and critique at this point, because they went over the offseason, I think, knowing that they had some definite needs there. They pursued Jeff Hoffman. They backed out of that deal. I think the Orioles did as well. They turned their attention to Tanner Scott, who at least would have helped a bullpen that lost A.J. Minter, and Joe Jimenez may not pitch this year. So, that was kind of a double whammy. And then there really wasn't a plan C or plan D. And I know you're not trying to force deals and sign players to contracts that maybe you don't see the fit or it doesn't make sense, but is there nothing else out there? And I know it's hard to trade when your farm system has really been used a lot as trade capital the past few years, and you don't have the kind of prospects that you had a few years ago. But I think that's kind of the question that I would come back to is, was this a case of, at the start of the offseason, Alex Anthopoulos said, look, payroll's gone up every year that I've been here. We anticipate that could be the case this year again. We anticipate that. I don't know if expectation is the same thing as anticipation, but they got to be neighbors at least. And that just didn't happen. The Profar signing was, 2-3 weeks before spring training? So to that point, I think a lot of Braves fans were looking around wondering, are we going to do anything this offseason besides hope and besides wait on Ronald Acuna Jr. and Spencer Strider to get back? So Yeah, I think this is going to be an ongoing debate about what could have been done over the offseason. Why wasn't it done? Because the Braves, very profitable. The Battery is quite a popular scene and has helped them print money the past few years. You want to see that go back into the product. And even with a top 10 payroll, which they do have and they didn't always, there's still room to, I think, invest more in this club, despite having a great core signed up long term. You're a move or two away from maybe putting this club over the top. And I think that's what's so difficult for people to look at and say, why wouldn't you do that?
We asked that about a lot of teams, Grant. Trust me, why wouldn't you do that? But the answer is nobody knows except for the owner. So I don't know. Maybe one day when you own a team, I can be your co-owner and we can make the moves that we want to make to try to make people happy. If that happens, it'd be awesome.
I'd love it. I'd love
it. We're talking pitching. You're talking pitching and the injuries and the pitching and when Strider come back. What about the offense? The offense has been awful. They weren't very good. Here's the thing. The offense wasn't great last year either. So this is now going on 2 years in a row after historic years of, these young guys coming out and playing and doing all these things. And then the last couple of years, the offense has been offensive and they haven't scored a lot of runs. And I did the game in San Diego. And at the time, I think they made it to like 1 for 30 something with runners in scoring position. Right. And they scored 5 runs last night, but they were all unearned. I believe they were all Dodger mistakes. So where's the offense? Where's Austin Riley? Where's Albies? I know Acuna's out, but where's Olsen? Where are these guys that they've been counting? Michael Harris, where the heck is he? These guys they've counted on for years. They built their core on. Where'd it go?
I think outside of Marcell Ozuna, it's pretty fair to question the last year plus of this club because they simply have not performed. Even before Acuna got hurt a year ago, he was having an incredibly down year. I think he had 2 home runs heading to the last week of May. That wasn't the guy that went 40-70, and he's not even back yet. So we'll put him in a box over to the side because he should make this club better. But Michael Harris, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies, the list goes on. These are guys you expect to be run producers, and they weren't a year ago. And the Braves, they made this change at hitting coach, and you guys played. You've got a much more intimate look at how this stuff works. I'm sure changing the message and the voice and the delivery and looking into other things can be helpful, but I don't think you can lay it at the feet of the hitting coach and point at him and say, look, all these guys forgot how to hit, and it's your fault. I don't really know what the answer, though, is. Besides, I know that pressing is certainly natural. I talked to Austin Riley, Matt Olson, a few guys last year throughout the course of the season, and they said, look, we all want to be the guy that comes up with a hit, that wins the game, that wins the series, that turns our season around, but you can't do it every single at bat. You can't take that up there with you. I feel like they almost have to be kind of minimalist, if that's possible. I know this is a game that will just beat you down when you're carrying this around with you, but that, I think, as much as anything, is the problem because physically they're in the prime of their career, so it doesn't really make any sense to watch everybody slump or fall off to this degree, to regress to this degree for as long as they have.
How much of a bummer is the Profar news, and what was your reaction when you saw that, as well as the reaction from Braves country? Because this guy had a ton of success last year. It was by far the best year of his life in baseball, and Braves fans don't have the connection to him. Padres fans fell in love with Profar last year, but it's not like Braves fans are going to be defending any iota of what just happened, right?
No, he doesn't have that kind of equity with this club. But I will say when he came in spring training, that first impression that everybody got of him was, hey, this guy's part of the solution. I know that the vibe that he brought to the club was energetic, was upbeat, was the kind of thing that you're feeling like, okay, we want to energize this club a little bit. We need somebody to help us out at leadoff with no Ron Acuna Jr. And Alex Anthopoulos said this on the record several times when they identified hitters over the course of the winter that they liked. It was obviously Juan Soto and then a large gap. And then they felt like Jurickson Profar was maybe that guy to circle back to, depending on how his market shook out. They got that deal done. Clearly, I think there's some buyer beware when an over 30 player, breaks out or has that career year. And you kind of wonder, well, can he replicate that? But they felt like all the advanced metrics, the underlying data said, sure, we think he can. And a 3-year deal makes sense. And then something like this happens. And now I don't know what kind of player you're truly getting. And I think it's fair to question. And this has been going on for a long time. Jurickson Profar is not the only guy that's gotten himself into this kind of hot water. But I don't know really, if there's a way to get over this very quickly. It's going to be a very steep hill for him to climb to kind of win back the club that he hasn't been a part of for very long. But yeah, I think for fans watching a club, struggle to score as much as this team did, and then lose a guy that's supposed to be part of the fix for this team, it's an extra level of frustration that I don't think they're going to get over anytime soon.
Because this is such a bad start, and I don't want to go too hard on the history, Grant, because we have 3 wildcard teams these days, so it's not impossible for the Braves to go 0-7 and then bounce back. You and I spoke about this. I said 2-5, maybe even 1-6 on this trip. And I'm like, I'm still not going to be worried. I am not too concerned yet. I'm with AJ. I think they could beat up the Marlins this weekend. My question is, though, do you think that they speed up the Ronald Acuna Jr. rehab process because they feel like they might have to get him back sooner to win a few extra games to sneak into the playoffs, right? I know it's super early, but these are 7 losses. And it's a very competitive National League. The Padres look like they're going to be better than many anticipated. The Giants look like they could be better than anticipated. These are all potential wild card contenders with Atlanta. So do you think that they will look at this and say, we're being so cautious with Acuna, but he is ready, so let's get his bat back in the damn lineup?
Yeah, I wish, or I think, and I'm sure that they wish, that there was a clearer path to bring him back, but your DH is Marcell Ozuna. He's your best hitter. I mean, do you dare maybe put him in the outfield some, which he, by the way, hasn't played in going on 2 years? Do you want to roll the dice and put him out there? What if something happens to Marcell and then he gets hurt? And then now you're without Ozuna, and Acuna wasn't all the way back. So we could probably come up with a lot of what-if scenarios, but if that DH spot was open, I think they might be more open to that idea. But the fact is, they need him to come back and be the regular right fielder. He said physically he was 90-95% when he showed up for spring training, but he's just now looking to get cleared for the running drills he needs to do, more outfield work, and then obviously the rehab assignment. So to make a long story short as I can, I just don't see them pushing his timetable up by very much. But if he physically checks all the boxes and passes all the tests and feels like he's ready and he can make the team better, I think at that point you do have to kind of look around and say, okay, well, why not? Because the alternative is just kind of churning through a lot of 4th and 5th outfielder types. And I don't think that's going to help energize the offense the way that an MVP caliber player like Ronald Acuna Jr. certainly could, both on the field and also I think the momentum that he could bring with him to just kind of lift the spirits of this club at a time where they could very much use all that they can get.
Do you think Brian Snitker is going to be the manager again next year?
That's a really good question, and I've gotten that one a lot, and I've kind of wondered about it. I mean, next year would be 50 years in the Braves organization. Does he need that to cap it all off? No, but it's a nice round number. I kind of wondered if this might be his last year, just based on the last couple of seasons and how trying 2024 was. But then they got knocked out of the playoffs, and the first thing he said was, I can't wait to be back at spring training. And it's just who he is. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does decide at some point this year, especially if things kind of continue to spiral or go out of control, if he doesn't make that decision himself. But one more year, and beyond that, I think you're probably looking at that transitional period, and they're looking at a new, perhaps a new manager at that point. So I know that's a really long answer to say I don't know, but it's just hard to tell right now. I think that how this season plays out might inform that decision a lot for Brian Snitker at this stage in his life.
Grant, I asked him this on Saturday. I asked him, I said, hey, I was sitting with Snit and who I played for, and I said, hey, what do you think? And he gave the exact answer. I don't know, but I know this. He did say the 50 years does mean something. So you can say it doesn't mean anything. Why does it matter? But think about 50 years in one organization, the only organization Brian Snitker has ever known, 50 years with that organization.
Yeah, and think about this.
He's going to be part of the organization one way or the other, but he's been 50 years on the field with this organization. Not just 50 years in the organization, on a field. So I think that does mean something to him. Do I think it's enough to make him come back? I don't know. He also at the same time was like, I want to see my grandkids play and I want to spend time with my family. I've never got to travel. There's places I want to do, things I want to do. So I don't know, but I think in some capacity he'll make the 50 years, whether it's, special assistant or whatever it is, or manager. I think it's kind of going to be up to him, unless they go 0-162, which I don't think is going to happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to happen. But think about the start for Brian Snitker as far as the managing coaching side is concerned. His playing career was just a few years, and then Hank Aaron calls him up and says, hey, we think a lot of you. Would you like to join our organization as a coach? I mean, that's how far back his history goes, how deep those roots are. Obviously, all the time he spent under Bobby Cox, he's managed or coached at virtually every level and every affiliate the Braves have had for that 50 years or played there. So I would think that 50 is pretty meaningful for him. But, I know he does love being a grandfather, a husband, and, like everybody, he'd probably like to take a vacation when it's warm outside. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's true. Grant, great to have you as always. And we'll see if things improve this weekend for the Bravos. Check out Grant on Twitter and follow all of his shows and everything that he does at Grant McAuley on Twitter. Thank you, Grant.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.